So I came into philanthropy because my father was actually quite a successful businessman. And I had just completed my master's degree at the School of Oriental and African Studies and really thought I would work for a nonprofit. That was probably the trajectory I was going to go to. And I had some health issues and I came home and he asked me if I would be interested in helping him start our family's foundation, the Schooner Foundation. And so I knew very little about philanthropy. I knew about the Ford Foundation, I knew about some of these larger family foundations, but it was certainly not a planned career trajectory. And I thought I would be doing it part-time and help him get it started, and it ended up being a totally new career path, which was very exciting. So I ran the foundation for 14 years, and now, because I've moved to Nairobi, Kenya, I ran it from Washington, D.C., I now specifically advise on primarily our work in Africa. So it was, it's been a very exciting career path, but not one that I particularly planned. So the Schooner Foundation's sort of mission statement is really to look at human rights, peace and security, and economic opportunity as sort of the three legs of a stool, if you will. Very early we thought about human rights as something we want to look at and focus our efforts on. And of course, it can be looked at quite broadly. If you look at the UN Declaration for Human Rights, it can be the right to health, the right to assembly. So we look at it quite broadly. So that enables us to, I suppose you could label us as a health funder, an education funder. But for us, the lens that we look through is human rights. And then peace and security, the issue of nonproliferation was something that had interested my father for a long time, in eliminating nuclear weapons. And so that was part of our mandate. And then economic opportunity was really, I would say, the third leg that came along, because the time I spent in the field, when I would talk to people, probably the most important thing they would talk about is their ability to support themselves and their family economically, and realizing that if people have nothing to lose, if they don't have a job, if they don't have a stake, it's much easier than to descend into civil war or conflict. But if people have stable jobs and the chance to support their families, it's usually a much more stable environment. So they sort of all work together to achieve the same goal. One of the most successful strategies and some of our most successful grants have been to organizations which some people call intermediaries. And I don't love that term because I think it doesn't properly describe really the agency or the strategies behind them. So for example, the Fund for Global Human Rights, the Plowshares Fund. So these are foundations themselves that give much smaller grants. For example, the Fund for Global Human Rights gives small grants to human rights organizations in 16 countries around the world. And I myself would never have the ability to do that kind of due diligence, or even from a legal perspective, because they wouldn't be a 501c3, get that really important 5,000, 30,000 to a group on the ground. So for us to give larger grants, so right now we give 250,000 to the Fund for Global Human Rights. We gave about the same to the Plowshares Fund that works on nonproliferation and Iran, North Korea, issues like that. To me, that's a huge success, because they can go on to do the kind of work that we couldn't, we just don't have the capacity, but we can trust that our larger grant enables them to do that kind of work. So that's been particularly, I think, successful, and I think some foundations shy away from doing that. But particularly if you're a smaller foundation and you don't have the program staff yourself, I think it's a very smart strategy. What inspires me about philanthropy, that's an easy one, is the people. You get to meet the most extraordinary people. Just meeting the individuals who, are doing the work quietly, have very little funding, very small organizations, but they're changing the lives of people who otherwise I think would be really living in despair. So for me, it's really getting a chance to see, I suppose, the worst of mankind, but then really the resilience and the inspiring sort of response to that. What humans do to each other is by far the most rewarding thing for me, is the people.